All right, so first of all, I got to apologize. I'm coming off the tail end of COVID, so I sound like I've got an entire possum up in my sinuses. Secondly, if you at your table are playing Dungeons and Dragons with critical strikes as written in the rulebook, you haven't been doing this long enough. You don't realize that it's busted. You haven't realized that it's totally lackluster, and you haven't sat through enough games. So today, that's what we're talking about. Let's make this better. See you soon. Hey everybody, welcome to iCast Guidance, your Dungeons & Dragons podcast, where every week, Garrett and I take a ruler mechanic in the game of D&D that's lackluster or needs improvement, and we offer you advice on how to make your game around that rule more interesting or more fun. So, sharpen up those daggers. We're getting started right now. Hey everybody, welcome to iCast Guidance. Garrett and I are gathered today to talk about the realms of critical strikes in the game. Garrett, how's it going?
Good. How are you doing today?
I am awesome. The weather's gorgeous. I feel good. We're playing D&D tonight.
Yes, we are.
So I'm psyched about that.
Gonna be good.
It is gonna be good.
Yes, the weather is changing.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
Yeah. And tonight's game, we're in a classic dungeon crawl. So we're deep in the heart of the minis and uncovering what's happening in the dungeon. It's exciting.
Oh yeah. Classic dungeon crawl, fighting. Hey, maybe we'll get some critical hits tonight.
Maybe, which is why all of the information we're about to share with our listeners will be fresh in our minds. Although I don't have time to do some of the things we're going to talk about tonight. So, as we normally do in our episodes, we start out with the introduction to the topic, and critical strikes are all over the place when we do searches for how house rules modify critical strikes to make the game more exciting. And the reason for that...
So, I mean, in all honesty, the rules is written in the player's handbook. It's a little lackluster, maybe?
Totally.
Because nothing's worse than rolling a nat 20, critical hit, and you roll really crappy.
Yeah, your damage dice. We can go anywhere on TikTok and we can find 15 videos from all the top video makers that are just like, here's the one problem with critical. And it's like, yeah, duh. We've all been there. Mm-hmm. It's like you roll the critical hit, you're going to roll a 1d12 plus your strength modifier, whatever that might be.
And you roll a 1.
And you roll a 1. And it's like, well, that defeats the purpose. What kind of critical hit is that? Mm-hmm. Okay, so we find all these solutions in forums online that sort of attempt to solve this problem, or at least modify house rules.
Yeah, I was gonna say, out of a lot of the things that we've looked up, trying to come up with house rules or bending the rules, critical strike seems to be like one of the most talked about subjects out there, just because of it's a big deal, changing it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I mean, we'll get into it. I mean, everyone, if you don't know, rules is written in the player's handbook. When you roll a nat 20, you get to roll extra dice for the attack's damage against the target. Roll all your attack's damage dice twice and add them together. Then add any relevant modifiers. So, for example, Greatsword, 2d6. Let's just say you have a +3 modifier. You would roll 4d6 plus the +3 modifier.
Right.
Same goes for spells, which when you're talking about house rules, that's where it kind of gets a little gray area because it can get very overpowered. But I mean, if you're rolling a guiding bolt and you critically hit on that, standard damage would be 4d6 for level 1. You're rolling 8d6 dice.
Yeah.
But nothing feels worse than average damage, rolls out to 15 on a critical strike. And it's just like, you just had a really crappy roll.
And this is a good moment for us to talk about how the difference between a melee attack and a spell, and also for a hot second, back in the days of 1 D&D, when D&D Beyond was about to totally blow the lid off of the entire D&D world, there was a rule that had been written into 1 D&D about critical strikes that basically limited it to not only player characters and not monsters, but also melee attacks, where all of a sudden spells were no longer capable of double damage dice for critical strikes. Okay, that never came to fruition, so we don't really need to talk about that for too long, but I think I understand the thinking behind that. Because a critical hit with a longsword requires the right connection of metal on meat, the right amount of strength, the perfect swing, and it says, yeah, really carve that baby up. Whereas Guiding Bolt, I mean, does this just mean you hit them in the right spot? Because there's not really much more to it than that.
Yeah, I mean, hit them in the right spot or, really connected with that spell, but...
Yeah, because I can't imagine that with just the right verbal and somatic component, like usage, your spell is more powerful than it was, with a roll of a 20 than it was with a roll of a 16. Both hitting, but one doing critical damage. It just doesn't seem right to me.
Yeah.
That being said, I don't want to take critical strikes away from the spellcasters.
No, because and that's another aspect. Just taking it away, because some of the things that we've looked up take away the rolling of the dice. A couple of these, it's just like, well, just roll max damage. Don't even roll the dice. Just what is Guiding Bolt? Max damage would be 48. Don't even roll the dice.
Right, so 32 points of damage automatically.
Yeah. So, or no, it's 48 is the number. If you double it.
48 is the number.
Yes.
I thought you were
just
saying
two under 50.
I thought you were saying 4d8.
Nope.
Gotcha.
Some people just say just roll max damage.
Yeah.
But that would be doubling. So that's the other system that we've seen. So sorry. Guiding Bolt max would be 24.
24.
Yes.
Right.
Without any tweaking of the rules as written.
Right.
If you're just taking the max damage.
So with the doubling of or I should say, we're going back to now, if we were to talk about the Chris Perkins rule.
Yes.
Or the no shit crit, or, these are all the same thing we're talking about here. The Chris Perkins rule, the no shit crit.
This seems to be the popular one.
Right.
That a lot of people reference.
So this is the first and most popular modification on the critical strike rule that we see all over the place out there. What is it?
And this is the one that we use in our game currently.
Which I'm thinking about changing.
And honestly, after doing this research, yes, I've had my opinions on our rule in game, and we'll bring it up. The no shit crit, Chris Perkins rule, whatever you want to call it. You would take max damage for your standard dice. Then you would roll the standard amount of dice and then add your modifier. You don't double your modifiers, just like the rules. So let's go back to the Greatsword with the 2d6 plus 3. So you would start off by getting a max of 12 plus 3, and then you would roll 2d6 and get that outcome and add it all together. So you can never roll less than your maximum standard hit. And then you still get to roll extra damage on top of it because a crit should, feel good.
Right.
And what we said in the beginning, nothing's worse than rolling crappy dice on your standard rules as written. So I think that's why people always tweak it.
Yeah, exactly. So this sort of now justifies the impact and the feel-good notion of the critical strike. It says, okay, we're going to give you the top end on your first set of dice, and from there it's going to be a roll.
Yes. And we've used this now for a few years in our games. And my opinion, one, it's very punishing when the DM uses it against low-level players.
Well, yeah.
It will almost always result in an auto kill.
In level 1, to be clear.
Yes, especially. Even at level 2, I mean, depending on what you're using, but if you're doing max damage and you get a good roll on top of it, you're getting close to an auto kill.
Right.
And we played it, and I felt like, especially when it comes to players that use sneak attack, smite damage, certain spells. I mean, we were just talking about it before. A Guiding Bolt, 46. We're now rolling that is max, 24, plus an extra roll. I threw out some rolls before, prepping for today. So I was rolling the max plus those extra 46, and I was averaging out just under 40 points of damage.
Wow.
I mean, I got it. I rolled it three different times, 36, 37, 39. That's
big.
For a level 1 spell.
That's huge.
It's huge.
Right.
And then you start adding in, like I said, sneak attacks, smite damage. It adds up.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it swings the other way if the DM's using it on you.
Well, there are other variations on there's different modifications that people use to alter their critical strikes that sort of now say, all right, we understand where this is either too OP or too lackluster. So let's get into some of those, because I think some of the ones that we have in the list are actually pretty good. And many of you may have heard of these before. Hopefully you haven't heard of all of them, but let's talk about some of those really quickly. So, the first one is, I saw one that's kind of interesting. It's called the bonus D20 rule.
Okay.
And in the bonus D20 rule, if you roll a critical hit, you get to roll an additional D20. Now, on that D20, on a 10 or higher, you get an additional damage die. So you're already going to get your double dice roll, okay? But on the 10 or higher on the bonus D20, you get one more damage die. On a 9 or lower, the critical damage happens rules as written, right?
Okay.
Just the straight up rules as written. Now, what this does is it says, okay, we're not automatically giving you the max, but we're not automatically giving you the lackluster. You have this chance to say how much more.
A little extra.
A little extra.
Little extra.
Right? But here's the thing. On that bonus roll with the bonus D20, if you roll another nat 20, this now triggers a third roll. Okay, now, so you roll the first nat 20, right? And then you're going to roll again to get the bonus die. And if that's a nat 20, okay, great. You're going to get that extra damage die just like we talked about. But now you roll a third time. And on the third roll, if you get a nat 20 again, it is an instant kill of the adversary no matter what. Now, to be clear, the odds of rolling 3 nat 20s in a row, which is what this would take, is 1 in 8,000. So if you're worried about it being too OP, I think a 1 in 8,000 shot of cleaving the head right off of an opponent is kind of cool.
Yeah, I mean, are you ever going to see it? Probably not. I did see online someone mention an auto kill.
Yes.
But it was with a second nat 20, not a
Correct.
third. And we have witnessed 2 nat 20s in a row
Right.
in our games before.
Right.
It's not common, but 3 in a row?
Well, here's the thing. I think this rule is not about the possibility of getting it.
Of the auto kill.
Correct. It's about the intensity and the drama at the table
Okay.
on the prospect of getting it.
I can get down with that.
Right? Because if rolling 2 in a row obviously is epic.
And you're getting an extra bonus damage.
You're still getting that extra damage.
Yeah.
But then that moment when that player is about to unleash that third D20, the tension at the table is going to be off the chain. Especially if the foe is Strahd. The DM's going to be like, shit, the whole game's going in attack right now.
I can just imagine right now, if you did happen to get the second nat 20 and just the suspense of about to roll that third die.
It's incredible.
I could see that.
Yeah, it would just be, I think that would be a really fun way to say, it's not always max. It's not as lackluster as the original rules is written.
Okay.
And it's got a possibility of some real intensity.
All right.
So I liked that one.
I like
quite a
that
bit.
one. Yeah. Going back in time a little bit would be the 4th edition critical rule. And a lot of people refer to this one just to make it easy, where the 4th edition critical hit rule was just maximum damage.
Right.
Instead of rolling the die, the powers damage you deal max damage.
Right.
I like that. It's not overpowered, but there's a couple I've seen a couple of people comment on that one, you're not rolling dice. Everyone likes, we collect our dice. Everyone loves their die. And you're losing a connection to that if you're just saying, oh, max damage. Because a critical hit's supposed to be a, exciting, fun, exhilarating thing.
In a sense, it gives you permission to roll again.
So permission to roll again, permission to roll just a ton of die.
Right.
So there's some negatives to that one, but it seems balanced because it's not too overpowered. You're not rolling insane amounts of damage, but on the second hand, someone could have rolled max damage the previous turn on a regular hit.
Right.
So there's really not a bonus to it.
Exactly. There's another one that I like that I think you and I have talked about in the past, and I think this is the one I would love to employ at the table, and that's exploding dice.
Oh, yes.
I mean, exploding dice to me is one of the most potentially fun alterations to bring into this. And the way exploding dice works is if you crit, you're going to roll your rules as written dice. You're going to roll the damage twice. So let's say that that's 2d12 on a normal strike, which is now 4d12 on a critical strike. So you roll your 4d12, okay? Now for every 12 that shows up out of those 4 dice, you add another d12. And if that d12 is a 12, you add another d12. So every single time a 12 shows up, another die is added to the dice pool, thus making the possibility of, like, I'm not going to say infinite damage. Imagine if it's a dagger and it's a d4.
Well, imagine a sneak attack. You're rolling, if we're talking like a higher level rogue with a lot of dice, or a paladin with a smite, they added a ton of damage, ton of dice. The chances of getting those extra higher, the max numbers, it's a lot.
Yeah.
It's a lot. And you know, you brought this up one other time. We mentioned this, and I think it spans from a Warhammer 40,000 rule. Is that correct? I'm pretty sure.
I said that. I have not played Warhammer myself. I don't know the rules of that game.
But I think it does.
Okay.
I think it comes from that. But this is the one that I think I would want to try at the table.
I mean, honestly, I think the possibility in a critical strike, especially in melee combat, if we just want to sort of immerse ourselves for a moment in the realism of, you know, theater of the mind combat, I am sneak attacking with 2 daggers. I shove one of those into your kidney, like all the way through, you're gonna die.
Yeah.
Okay, now you might have armor on, you might have evasive maneuvers, you might have some kind of ability to stop me. But if I get you just right, you're gonna die. And exploding dice on assassin sneak attack should have the potential for being lethal.
Yeah.
Not obvious. I mean, I don't want it to happen every time.
I like that one. I like that one.
It's a good one.
All right, what else have we seen?
Well, there's another one that I kind of like that I've heard from a couple of DMs out there when I start looking around online. And this one is, in the event of a critical strike, the DM either asks the player to describe how that critical strike went down, or the DM interprets it and it becomes a narrative.
Okay.
Right? So rather than just being about raw numbers and dice rolling, we all of a sudden now inject the narrative, which you know that we love. And depending on what the player says about how the character utilized the critical strike, or how the DM says it, there are now conditions imposed. So let's say that the critical strike was just, you know, like a massive blow to the chest area of the opponent. Well, the critical strike could have caused the opponent to be knocked prone. That's a pretty simple one, right? So now there's a condition where we've got a prone opponent. But it's also possible that if someone says, you know, I slash my dagger out into space for the eyes of the opponent, the critical strike could be temporarily blinding to the opponent.
I was just going to say that as an example. Like, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, is there a rule in the player's handbook about selecting a certain body part for a hit? I don't know if this is just...
So that's always kind of, I think the flavor of that is played differently at different tables.
Yeah.
Right? So if I'm not mistaken, there is no specific rule about a particular body part. So it's like if I try to stick the dagger in the opponent's ear, right? Which for all intents and purposes, if that hits, that person's gonna have, you know, they're being pithed like a frog. They're gonna die.
Yeah, you're having a, you know, lobotomy, right? Like,
right.
You know.
Right. But at the end of the day, if I'm doing that to, you know, a creature that's got 67 hit points and I only inflict 7 points of damage, I effectively inserted a dagger into their brain, but barely touched them. Makes no sense.
But I like the flavor of, if you got that critical strike, using a story narrative to potentially gouge an eye out.
Yeah.
Maybe for a turn or two, or maybe for the rest of the battle, they have disadvantage.
Yeah.
That critical hit added a bonus to the rest of the fight.
Right.
In a story mode.
Which I think then, if you were going to use that narrative mode, as a DM, I would want the description of the attack before the roll is made, right? Because then the circumstances under which you're going to apply these conditions are less sort of advantageous, right? It's sort of like, okay, you want to take a shot for the ear, you want to go into the ear, fine, roll the dice, make an attack roll.
Well, then maybe, I agree on that, but then maybe that's where you could twist it by what I've seen online, and I haven't seen a ton of examples, is creating a critical hit Bible.
Oh, yes.
So that, you roll for it. You roll a D100 or a D20 and depending on how many things you have in there, maybe in there are the certain circumstances like gouging an eye out or, wounding a limb or stuff like that.
Or one of the big things we come up against is every time we're doing a search for house rules and saying, what do I do about this critical strike problem? And I see this rule and I see that house rule. I see the one about narrative. I see one about exploding dice. I see one about the Chris Perkins rule. And I'm like, which one's going to work best for us? How about all of them? How about if every single one we find goes into the critical strike Bible? Right? And then when you roll that critical strike, it's like, all right, which one are we dealing with?
Which one are we using? Oh, wow. Oh, I like this.
Yeah, I think that could be the best way to go.
I like this.
So for me, I'm a little bit about surprise, right? Because critical strikes should never really be total failures. But I think you never know what you're going to get when you connect right.
Oh, I think we need to implement that.
Yeah, I agree.
It's simple enough. We'll just make a chart. Let's find 10 different examples online.
Yeah.
Make a chart, roll for it.
Yeah, if you crit strike, it's like a 1d10.
This is the rule you're using.
That's it.
Oh, I like that.
That's it. All right, we figured it out.
I like that.
Now, I have another broken mechanism in the critical strike thing that I thought about, and mathematically, it's really fucked. I mean, I hate to say it like that, but it's really weird to think about, and I know that as soon as Nathan is in this room with us when we're playing D&D tonight, I'm going to lay this one on him because he's a mathematician and he's going to exactly tell me how stupid I am for thinking of this, okay? But I want to throw it out at you right now. Okay, so in my mathematical scenario, the higher the AC, the better percentage I have of a chance of making a critical strike. Let me explain, because this is really, really strange. Let's say my melee attack bonus is +5, okay? And I am now attacking a creature that has an AC of 15. So we know that I have to roll a 10 or better on a 20-sided die in order to hit this thing, right? I roll a 10, add my attack bonus, I have made a 15, that makes that a hit, okay? So now the numbers that I can roll on a 20-sided die in order to succeed are 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. There's 11 numbers there. That effectively gives me, when I roll, a 9.1% chance of a critical strike, because 20 in that scenario, out of all the hits I could make, is a 9.1% chance. Stay with me. I am going somewhere here. Okay? Now, let's take that foe and up the armor class to 20. This is a much more well-armored foe. Okay? Given that my attack bonus is +5, the only numbers I can roll to succeed on a hit are 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20. So there are only now 6 numbers that will produce a hit. So technically on the first foe, the AC of 15, I'm going to be hitting about 50% of the time. On the second foe, I'm going to be hitting about 25% of the time, right?
Right.
So obviously I'm hitting a less percentage chance of my attacks, but on the foe with the higher AC, I now have let me see, I calculated it out, a 16.7% chance of a critical strike. So yes, I'm hitting fewer times, but my percent chance of a critical strike is higher.
Technically odds, right? Correct me if I'm wrong.
No, I don't think it's odds. I think if I'm just calculating my percentage, the percentage of the time I'm going to score a critical strike is higher
It's based on if you're going to hit.
Of course, and I know that's where my flaw is in all of this thinking.
I want Nathan's opinion on this now.
Right, because it's really
Let's get the math whiz in here.
It's messed up when you think about it.
Yeah.
And I think it's a really nerdy approach to finding out how this whole system maybe doesn't function well, but it does offer kind of an interesting paradox to the whole system. So maybe I just tipped my hand at how absolutely monumentally stupid I am when I think about this stuff. I don't think I am, but maybe I am. Okay, so let's get some takeaways for today, because I think this actually has been a good discussion around critical strikes.
Yeah.
So number one, critical strikes rules is written too lackluster, not enough going on there. We need to improve it. We already know this.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. Then we go to the no shit crit, which is the one everybody uses, where in any given situation, when you critical strike, you take the dice that would be rolled, max them, and then add a roll of those same dice to that number, and then add modifiers. Then we've got other examples of things, like we've got the narrative situation. Yep. We've got exploding dice. We have, what was some of the other ones we had?
We didn't mention this one, but this was one that's, I labeled it as the compromise crit. And it's essentially, the rules is written, rolling double the amount of your attack dice, but you can't roll lower than max. So if you did get crappy roll, just take the max that it would have been of a standard hit. So we'll go back to the example of the great sword. 2d6 plus 3. Standard hit, that's 15 max.
Right, 12 plus 3.
12 plus 3.
Yep.
So in a critical strike, you're getting the opportunity to roll 4d6 plus 3.
I see.
Which I did some rolls, averaged out 14, 19, 23.
So on the 14.
On the 14, you would have just taken a 15.
Gotcha.
So you have the opportunity to get the 23 or the 19 because you're rolling for, d6 plus your modifier. So you can't get that shitty feeling, essentially.
Right.
But it's not blowing it out of the water because you have max damage plus some.
Right. So I want to add one more to this.
So that's why I called it the compromise.
I like the compromise. Yeah. And this is another one maybe for the critical strike Bible, right? Or the roll table. All right. So one more we can add to this is if you critical strike against an opponent, you roll dice as rules is written, right? But then that opponent is now vulnerable in the next attack, which means the next person that attacks will roll double damage because they're vulnerable in the attack, right? Likewise, I love this idea that if you critical fail in an attack, rather than going through the complications of a 100 option critical fail Bible, you simply expose yourself.
Yeah.
Maybe you overspin in the miss, and now it's almost as if an attack of opportunity could come. Right? So rather than make you vulnerable, maybe there's an advantage on the next attack against you. But there is some way
I could see those.
Yeah, those are good ones. They're basic.
To mix it up.
Yeah, they're basic.
Something different.
But they could work.
But again, we're going back to saying there are so many different options out there and so many different opinions on how to change the critical hit rules.
Right. I think if I wanted to make an argument for one rule I see out there that I absolutely cannot stand. I think it's like one of the worst things tables do. And if you're doing this out there, I never want to play at your table. If you're a DM that uses this rule, don't invite me to your table, number one. And number two, I have a funny feeling it's miserable at your table. Yeah, I'm talking to you out there, okay? If you insist on confirming critical hits, in other words, I get a critical hit, and you make me roll again just to confirm that it was in fact critical, you're the most boring DM on the planet. It's like you are a control freak. I don't want to play at your table. That really bothers me. It's like, what happened to the excitement of rolling the natural 20?
Yeah.
Jumping out of your chair because you rolled a natural 20 is now now I only get a 1 in 400 chance to confirm it. Stop using confirming on crits. You're a monster. Anyway,
back to the program.
There, I had my moment. Okay, I had my hot take. I think these are good. And I'm really actually looking forward to making this table. So at some point, Garrett and I are going to get together our supplementals. These are the things that we decide we're going to develop as downloadable PDFs that you can use to play this game. And for this one, I think that Critical Strike Bible as a rollable table is one of the elements we're going to include.
I like that idea.
Yeah.
I like that idea.
So, all right, everybody, listen, thank you so much for listening to this episode of iCast Guidance. If you have any house rules at your table that differ from what we have, jump onto our channel on YouTube, which is Wither and Bloom Studios on YouTube, and get into our community section. Follow us, get our community section, and tell us about it. I'll put a post up there just to kind of follow up with this, but definitely give us some feedback on this. We really thank you for listening. We're really grateful you're here, and we will see you next time. Garrett, thanks for the chat, man.
Yeah, it was good.
All right, we'll talk to you soon.
See you.
All right, everybody. iCast Guidance is produced by Todd Lambrix and Garrett Brennan. Head over to YouTube, where we can be found at Wither and Bloom Studios, where you can see the production of this podcast every Sunday morning live at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're looking forward to seeing you there. Take care.